A barista solves a guest's problem in 6 languages, unaware her customer was a global CEO. It was one of those New York evenings where everything moved fast, yet felt suspended in the air. Snowflakes drifted lazily under the amber glow of streetlights, painting a soft blur against the windows of Maple Roast, a cozy corner cafe tucked between cold gray buildings. Inside, the warm clatter of mugs and low jazz music offered refuge from the biting winter outside. At the back corner of the cafe, Nathan Hale sat hunched over his laptop, unmoved by the comfort around him. The CEO of Transglobe Logistics, a man known for precision and foresight, was now battling something completely out of his control. Language. A critical shipping contract from Marseille had just landed in his inbox, entirely in French, including annexes, clauses, and updated tariff changes. A last-minute port change demanded confirmation within the next hour, or his company would forfeit their cargo's place on a transatlantic vessel. That delay could spiral into millions in financial loss, legal messes, and rerouted supply chains across Europe. His in-house translator was in the hospital. The backup? Not responding. Nathan leaned back in his chair, running a hand over his face. He tried feeding the document into a translation app, once, then again. The results were clumsy. Some words were outright wrong. Worse, the legal nuances were missing entirely. One misinterpretation could mean agreeing to port charges that weren't his to pay. That was when he noticed her. Ali, the barista with the soft blonde ponytail, steady hands, and a calming presence behind the counter. She had served him coffee almost every weekday for the past 6 months. Always polite, never prying. Today, however, she did something different. She walked over. Her tone was gentle but confident. "You look like you're having a bit of trouble with French." "I know a little. I could take a quick look if that's okay." Nathan blinked, startled by the offer. For a split second he hesitated. This wasn't a grocery list. This was a multi-million-dollar contract, a legal document. But when he looked into her eyes, he didn't see curiosity or ambition, just honesty, and maybe a trace of empathy. He nodded. Ellie didn't sit, but leaned slightly over his table, scanning the screen. Her eyes moved quickly. Then she began to speak, low, focused, precise. She translated the opening clause aloud, then a shipping rate section, adjusting on the fly as she saw context emerge. Her voice was steady. She used the right terms, dock dues instead of the generic port fees, even corrected the sequence of dates to match French formal writing structure. It was not guessing, it was understanding. Nathan watched her more than he listened. She wasn't just reading, she was decoding. Then she paused. "Mind if I take a look at the annex, the German one?" Nathan's eyebrows lifted, but he said nothing and scrolled down. Ellie read it with quiet concentration, then corrected the interpretation of a sentence that had been butchered by the translation tool. "And this line about shipping surcharges for delay, it's not just delays. It means surcharges for late customs clearance. It's a contractual fee, not a delay window." Nathan stared at her. "You read German too?" She gave a small smile and tilted her head. "A little. Let me see the last page." There, buried in the fine print, was a Spanish footnote outlining exceptions for cargo insurance based on jurisdiction. Ellie didn't hesitate. "Oh, this is misphrased. It implies full liability. What they meant is partial liability unless negligence is proven." Big difference. Nathan finally closed his laptop halfway, like someone stepping back from a painting they'd been too close to see clearly. He looked at her, not with skepticism, but with something new. Awe. "You know all 3 of these languages?" Ali reached for the coffee pot on his table, refilled his cup with practiced ease. 6, she said softly, then turned, walked back behind the counter, and returned to wiping down cups as if she hadn't just saved a logistics empire from $1 million mistake. Nathan sat still. The snow outside continued to fall, silent and slow, like the moment he'd just witnessed, a moment that didn't need to be loud to change everything. The coffee rush had quieted. The sky outside had darkened into deep indigo, and the snow kept falling, soft and constant. Inside Maple Roast, the hum of conversation had faded to scattered murmurs, leaving only the occasional hiss from the espresso machine and the sound of typing from Nathan's laptop. Ellie stood at a distance, wiping down the countertop, but her eyes kept drifting back to the man in the corner. She noticed the way he stared at his screen, now not in panic but something else. Thoughtfulness, hesitation, maybe disbelief. Nathan had stopped editing. After a minute, he turned his laptop again toward her, slowly this time. "Would you mind looking at one more section?" Ellie walked over without a word. He opened the Italian annex of the contract, the part most people skipped or skimmed. She scanned it, her brow furrowing ever so slightly. Then, she pointed to a sentence buried in the middle of a dense paragraph. Her tone shifted, still calm, but now sharper, more precise. "This line, storage fees calculated by gross volume, it looks harmless, but it isn't." Nathan leaned in. "If you leave this phrasing as is," she continued, "they can apply warehouse fees based on gross volume, not actual palletized space. That means, if they want to stack air, they can charge you for it." Nathan blinked. She tapped another line just beneath it. "And they tied this to customs holding status, which means if your shipment is delayed due to any customs technicality, they can classify it as dead storage. That's a loophole, and a costly one." "How costly?" he asked. Ellie looked up. "Millions, depending on how long it sits. And they won't even have to notify you until the charges are incurred." Nathan stared at the screen, then slowly exhaled. He had read that section, so had legal, 3 times. Not one of them had flagged it. "I can rephrase it for you," Ellie said, reaching into her apron and pulling out a black pen. "Just, in English for now. You'll need a legal translator to format it, but this will hold." She scribbled a new version on a napkin. It was clear, tight, and left no ambiguity. It accounted for storage, liability, customs exceptions, and duration caps. It was the kind of correction someone could only make if they not only knew the language, but understood what silence in a contract could cost. Nathan looked at the napkin like it was a lifeline. He wasn't sure what shocked him more, the mistake she had caught, or the fact that she had caught it faster than the entire Trans-Globe legal division. He leaned back. "You studied this stuff? Law? Logistics?" Ellie gave a small shrug, smiling faintly. "Languages," she said. "The rest, I picked up along the way." Nathan wasn't satisfied with that answer. He wanted to ask more, how, where, why, but something in her expression told him not to push. There was a silence between them, not awkward, just full. Nathan closed his laptop. For the first time that day, he felt like he could breathe. "I owe you dinner," he said finally, standing up, tucking his chair in. "Proper dinner, not just coffee and paperwork." Ellie's face softened, but she shook her head gently. "Thank you, but I can't." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "I have to pick up my son," she said simply, lifting her coat from the hook by the door. "Daycare closes at 7. She offered a polite nod, then stepped outside into the snow. Her silhouette blurred behind the frosted glass, then disappeared into the winter evening. Nathan remained still. Somewhere behind him, the espresso machine hissed again, but in his head all he could hear was her voice, steady and certain, reading between the lines of a contract, and, somehow, also between the lines of his day. And just like that, the woman who had saved his company a small fortune was gone, without asking for anything in return. The snowfall had thickened by the time Ellie ended her shift. The golden glow of Maple Roast behind her faded into the blue-gray hush of the city. Nathan sat quietly in his car across the street, engine idle, headlights off. He had been waiting, not out of suspicion or curiosity, but something gentler, something like gratitude that didn't know where else to go. He watched as Ellie stepped out, a thick scarf wrapped around her neck, her blonde hair tucked under a knit beanie. In one fluid motion, she crouched to the side of the building and lifted a small boy into her arms. He was maybe 4, bundled in a too-thin coat, his cheeks flushed pink from the cold. He didn't complain. He simply leaned his head against her shoulder and let himself be carried. Nathan blinked slowly. She had never mentioned a child, never once hinted at the weight she carried outside of language and latte foam. He followed from a distance, not closely enough to alarm her, just enough to stay in sight, like a shadow moving at a respectful pace. She walked several blocks through slushy sidewalks and flickering street lamps, shifting the boy's weight every now and then with the skill of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. They passed by a row of Christmas-lit shops, and she paused outside a small market with a faded "Discount Groceries" sign. Inside, she moved with precision, picking up a loaf of bread, a carton of eggs, a few bananas. Nothing extra, no impulse treats. Nathan noticed how she paused at the end-cap display of holiday chocolates, considered, then moved on without reaching for them. At the register, she paid in cash. Then she knelt down, wrapped her scarf around the boy, and kissed the top of his head before stepping back into the cold. The final stretch of their walk led them to a squat brick building with peeling paint and a broken porch light. The kind of place people passed by without looking twice. She balanced the groceries in one hand, shifted the boy to her hip, and disappeared inside. Nathan remained in his car for a long moment, staring at the door she had just entered. He didn't know what he had expected to find. Not this. Not a woman who could dissect international legal loopholes and still carry her son home through the snow like it was just another Tuesday. Later that night he returned. The block was quiet, the snow muffling the world like a thick blanket. He parked across the street, pulled his coat tighter, and approached the stoop. In his hands, a small paper bag filled with things she wouldn't buy for herself. A box of crayons, a stuffed polar bear, a few chocolate bars, a fresh pair of gloves, child-sized. He tucked a sealed envelope between the folds of the bag, no name, no return address. Inside, a few $100s in cash. Enough for warmth, enough for food, enough for something unexpected. And on a folded card, in his handwriting, "Thank you for saving an entire global shipping route with a pen and a napkin. This is only gratitude, no strings attached." He placed the bag gently in front of the door, then stepped back. No knocking, no announcement. Nathan returned to his car, started the engine, and disappeared into the falling snow, leaving only the warmth of a gesture he couldn't say out loud. The lobby of Transglobe Logistics was sleek and quiet, humming with the efficiency of a global corporation. Glass walls framed views of Midtown Manhattan, and the scent of polished marble lingered faintly in the air. Ellie stood just inside the revolving doors, holding her son's small hand. Benji clutched a worn stuffed bear under one arm, eyes wide as he looked up at the towering ceilings and moving escalators. Ellie's other hand held a white envelope, folded flat against her coat. Her fingers gripped it tightly. She approached the front desk. The security guard, a man in his 50s with a clipped tone and sharp eyes, looked up from his tablet. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Ellie said politely. "I'm here to return something to Mr. Hale. It's personal." The guard's eyes narrowed slightly. "Mr. Hale doesn't take walk-ins, especially not without credentials." "I understand, but if you could just tell him..." "Ma'am, I can't let you through. Please step aside." Ellie's voice caught in her throat. She looked around. Several employees passed by, their designer coats rustling, eyes flickering toward her and Benji, quick, assessing glances, like scanning something that didn't belong in the frame. Someone whispered near the elevators. "Is she lost?" "No," I think she's trying to see the CEO. Ellie bent down to adjust Benji's scarf, using the motion to steady herself. Her heart pounded, not from anger, but from the sudden weight of being out of place. She hadn't meant to cause trouble. She just wanted to give something back, to return the envelope she hadn't touched since finding it on her doorstep. She stood, preparing to thank the guard and leave, when a voice cut clean through the noise behind her. "Oh, stranger, she's not a stranger." Everyone turned. Nathan stood at the far end of the lobby, coat still on, briefcase in one hand. His gaze didn't waver. He's the reason this company didn't lose $2 million last week. He walked toward them. The guard straightened. A few people stopped mid-step. Nathan reached Ellie and looked at Benji, then back at her. "You came all the way here?" "I didn't want to keep the money," she said quietly, holding out the envelope. "I didn't help you because I expected anything. I helped because someone needed help." Nathan took the envelope, but didn't look at it. His eyes stayed on her. "You didn't have to bring it back." "I did," she replied. "And if you still need help, with contracts or translations or whatever it is, I'd rather do it the right way, not as a favor, as a job." Nathan nodded slowly. There was a pause between them, not hesitant, just full. "We just got a contract revision out of Tokyo. Legal's behind on the language review. It's technical, freight insurance terms and customs exceptions. No one on my team is fluent enough to handle it." Ellie tilted her head, thoughtful. "Is it in formal Keigo or plain form?" Nathan smiled, just slightly. "Both." She gave a small, confident nod. "Send it over." A few people in the lobby were still watching, but Ellie didn't notice anymore. Benji tugged on her coat, and she bent down to smooth his hair, whispering something that made him smile. Nathan stood beside her, less like a CEO now, and more like someone who had just remembered what trust looked like. He looked at the guard, his tone quiet but firm. "Next time she comes in, don't ask for an appointment." Then he turned back to Ellie. "Welcome to Transglobe." The first weeks passed quietly. Ellie came in 3 afternoons a week, sometimes 4. Her desk was tucked near the translation and legal department on the 12th floor, away from the noise of logistics operations. She kept her head down, her notes precise, her suggestions direct and useful. No one questioned why she was there after the second week, not when she revised a Portuguese customs clause that saved a shipment from being delayed in Sao Paulo, or when she identified a mistranslated Korean liability term that had snuck into a high-value contract. She didn't speak much, didn't overstep, but her work spoke clearly. Nathan noticed. He wasn't hovering, but he noticed. The way she read quickly with full comprehension, the way she switched between languages with no visible effort, like her mind simply shifted gears. Yet for all her fluency, she said very little about herself. One evening, long after the office had gone quiet, Ellie was still at her desk. Nathan passed by with his coat folded over his arm, paused, then stepped into the room. "Working late? Just finishing the Singapore freight clauses." They added a Mandarin section to the back page. Nathan leaned against the door frame, watching her scroll. "I have a question," he said. Ellie looked up. "I still don't understand," he said slowly. "You're fluent in 6 languages. You can catch things most legal consultants miss. How did that happen?" Ellie hesitated, her gaze drifting to the window. Snow was falling again, dusting the rooftops in soft white. "When life doesn't translate for you," she said quietly, "you learn to translate it yourself." Nathan didn't ask anything else. He didn't need to. They sat in silence for a while, side by side at the small conference table near the window. The lights were off, only the glow of the city filtered through the glass, streaks of yellow and red blurring in the snow. It was one of those moments where no conversation was required, just shared quiet, and the unspoken knowledge that both of them, each in their own way, had learned to survive without waiting for someone else to explain things. A few days later, it was Benji who brought the quiet to an end. It was mid-morning, Ellie was in the middle of reviewing a batch of French shipping terms when her phone buzzed. She checked it quickly, froze, then stood up. Nathan spotted her from the hallway. "Everything okay?" She didn't answer right away. Then, "The daycare called. Benji has a fever. They need me to come." Nathan didn't blink. "Where is he?" "Upper West Side." "I'll drive." She opened her mouth to protest, but he was already grabbing his coat. They rode in silence through light snow, the traffic unusually kind that day. At the daycare, Benji was curled on a cot, cheeks flushed, forehead warm. Ellie crouched beside him, stroking his hair. Nathan stood by the doorway, unusually still. When Ellie tried to lift her son, he stepped forward. "Here," he said gently. "Let me." He carried Benji to the car, holding him like someone who had done it before. Ellie didn't ask who he had done it for. She just watched. At the hospital, they waited. Nothing serious, just a viral fever. A few hours, some fluids, rest. Ellie sat beside the bed. Nathan brought coffee without asking. Later that evening, when Benji was dozing and the nurse had dimmed the lights, Nathan leaned against the wall near the window. "You know," he said, voice low, "that kid's Italian pronunciation is sharper than mine." Ellie smiled faintly. "Loves when I read to him in different languages. He thinks it's magic." Nathan looked at her, then at the small boy asleep under hospital white sheets. "It is." The tension didn't start all at once. It crept in quietly, like a draft from an old window no one thought to close. It came through glances exchanged near the elevator, through conversations that paused just long enough to sting when Ellie entered the room, through whispers tucked inside what passed for jokes. At first, she ignored it. Ellie had long since grown used to being underestimated, by customers who called her sweetheart while ordering lattes, by professors who dismissed her when she brought her baby to class, by employers who saw her as a temporary fill-in rather than someone building something permanent. She had learned to move forward anyway. But this felt different, more targeted, more deliberate. "She used to make coffee downstairs, right?" "Yeah. Crazy how fast some people climb when the CEO notices them. She must be really good at something." The laughter that followed was soft, but the implications were razor-edged. Still, Ellie kept working. She reviewed a Turkish rail freight contract line by line, corrected a dangerous mistranslation in a Russian customs agreement that could have cost the company hundreds of thousands, completed the quarterly audit Nathan had asked for 3 days ahead of schedule. Every task was precise, thorough, professional. It didn't matter. She felt the shift in the air around her. People who used to wave at her across departments now offered polite nods and excused themselves quickly. Slack messages lost their emojis. Emails dropped their greetings. Conversations in meetings moved around her instead of through her. She told herself it would pass, that what mattered most was the work. Then one afternoon, as she walked past a conference room, she heard it. "The latte linguist," one voice said, amused, followed by another. "She probably steams contracts better than milk." A pause, then laughter just loud enough to ensure she heard. Something inside her shifted. That evening, long after the lights on most floors had gone out, Ellie stayed behind. She moved quietly, collecting her few personal belongings. A USB drive, a notepad with margin scribbles in 5 languages, and a framed drawing Benji had made. Crayon lines curved into a picture of her at a desk. The title, in blocky handwriting, "Mom at Work." She placed the resignation letter on her desk. No melodrama, no tears, just the quiet dignity of someone who knew exactly when it was time to walk away. The next morning, she returned early, before the buzz of emails, before the curious eyes, before anyone could stop her. She came only to return her badge, finish a few file transfers, and leave without notice. She was sorting the last of her folders when she heard footsteps behind her. Nathan stood in the doorway, still in his coat. He looked at the nearly empty desk, then at her, his expression unreadable. "I heard," he said simply. Ellie didn't look up. Nathan stepped closer and placed a file on the table, a thick binder meticulously labeled. Inside, the finalized framework for the Internal Language Systems Initiative, a proposal Ellie had quietly built months ago to unify Transglobe's multilingual operations into a seamless global standard. The stamp in the corner read, "Approved." On top sat a clean white business card. The lettering was crisp, raised, certain. Ellie Winters, Director of Global Language Integration. She stared at it. Nathan's voice was calm but unwavering. "It's not a promotion. It's a role you created. One this company didn't even know it needed until you walked in." Ellie finally met his gaze, her voice low but clear. "I don't want a title handed to me because of whispers or out of pity." Nathan didn't blink. "I'm not handing it to you. I'm naming what you've already built." Silence stretched between them, long, still, heavy with everything unspoken. Outside the window, snow had begun to fall again, gentle, consistent, unconcerned with opinions. Ellie closed the binder slowly. She picked up the card, thumb brushing over her own name. She did not say yes, but she did not give it back either. Lucerne shimmered under a quiet curtain of snow. The city, nestled between lake and mountains, looked like a painting that had been paused mid-stroke, soft, still, almost unreal in its peace. Nathan, Ellie, and little Benji walked together along the cobbled path near the water, the old town's lights reflected in the river beside them. Their footsteps made only the faintest sound against the snow. It was late, but Benji was wide awake, bundled in a red coat, clutching a chocolate bar he had charmed out of a concierge earlier. He was chattering softly about ducks in the lake, about the hotel's elevator, about the 3 languages he'd heard in the hotel lobby that day. Nathan walked with one hand in his coat pocket, the other holding Benji's mittened hand. Ellie walked slightly behind, watching them, watching how Nathan slowed his stride to match Benji's shorter steps, how he listened when the boy talked, really listened. She wasn't sure when it had shifted, when Nathan had stopped being Mr. Hale, the powerful executive, and become this, someone who read bedtime stories in broken Spanish, who showed Benji how to balance on a bike, who waited outside the dentist's office because he didn't want them to go alone. They crossed a small stone bridge, the snow falling more heavily now, brushing their coats and eyelashes. Ahead, their hotel stood glowing like a lighthouse. Benji ran ahead, shouting that he'd race them to the lobby. Ellie stopped walking. Nathan turned back. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there, her cheeks flushed, her breath visible in the cold air. Then, "Have you ever thought about putting a name on whatever this is?" Nathan's eyebrows lifted slightly. Ellie didn't backpedal. Her voice was quiet but steady. "I mean us, you and me. This." Nathan didn't speak right away. He looked at her, really looked. Snow catching in her golden hair. Her eyes not uncertain, just vulnerable. Open in a way they hadn't been before. Then, without a word, he stepped closer, pulled something from his coat pocket, and dropped to one knee on the snowy street. Ellie gasped softly. Nathan opened the small velvet box. The ring inside wasn't elaborate. It wasn't glittering with oversized diamonds. It was clean, beautiful, refined, like something chosen by someone who valued meaning over performance. "I don't need to define this anymore," he said, voice rougher than usual. "Ellie, I love you. And I love Benji like he's my own flesh and blood." He glanced toward the boy, who was now peeking back over the bridge's stone railing. "I want to build a life with both of you. For real. No spaces in between. No quiet maybes." He looked back at her. "Will you marry me?" Ellie didn't speak at first. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't try to hide them. She looked at Nathan, her hand trembling slightly as she brought it to her mouth. Then she nodded. Once, then again, stronger. Yes, she whispered. Yes. From across the bridge, Benji saw everything. His eyes lit up and he ran back toward them as fast as his little boots could carry him. He threw his arms around Ellie's leg. She said yes, he shouted. She said yes. Then he turned to Nathan, beaming. Can I call you Dad now? Nathan dropped the ring box and pulled both of them into a hug, his voice breaking. Yeah, buddy, you can. They stood there, the three of them, wrapped in a moment that needed no translation. A year later, the waves of the Atlantic rolled in, soft and slow, against the shore of Maine. It was a quiet afternoon, late spring, the kind of breeze that smelled of salt and blooming things. A small gathering stood on a wooden deck overlooking the sea, no chandeliers, no grand ballroom. Just driftwood chairs, white ribbons in the wind, and the sound of seagulls calling from the rocks. Ellie stood at the end of the aisle. Her dress was simple, ivory, linen, flowing like sea foam around her feet. Her blonde hair was braided loosely, adorned with lavender sprigs from her late mother's favorite garden herb, because this beach, this ceremony, had once been her mother's dream, a place she never reached. Today, Ellie brought her there, in spirit. Nathan waited under an archway of white flowers, dressed in a soft gray suit. No tie. Just a folded handkerchief in his pocket, the same lavender hue. And beside him stood Benji, small, serious, with a boutonniere nearly larger than his chest. He held the rings in a velvet box with both hands, face solemn, like he understood the weight of the moment. When Ellie reached the front, her eyes met Nathan's, and nothing else existed. Not the guests, not the wind, not the months behind them. Only the future, steady, shared, chosen. The ceremony was short. Promises, laughter, a few tears. Benji sniffled when they said, I do, and Ellie knelt down to hug him before the kiss. Later, after the guests had wandered off toward the reception tent, Ellie stood alone on the balcony of their rented beach house, looking out at the endless gray new water. Nathan came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, chin resting lightly on her shoulder. You ever think, he murmured, that the woman who used to serve me coffee would end up being the person I'd love for the rest of my life? Ellie smiled, leaning back into him. No. But I always knew I'd be the one who understood you, in any language. Nathan kissed her temple, slowly. And from today forward, I get to be the man for both of you, officially. She turned in his arms, hands on his chest. You already were. Down on the beach, Benji was chasing the tide in his tiny vest and rolled-up slacks, shrieking with joy every time the water touched his toes. His laughter carried on the wind. Ellie and Nathan walked down to meet him. 3 figures, 3 sets of footprints, 3 lives tied together not by blood or chance, but by choice, trust, and something quieter than words. They walked along the shoreline, hand in hand, Benji between them, swinging their arms, toes splashing through the foam. The sun began to lower, tinting the water gold. The waves whispered something only the heart could understand. And that was the thing about love. It spoke in every language. And sometimes, in none at all. A barista solves a guest's problem in 6 languages. But in the end, it was love, the language that needed no translation. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of Ellie and Nathan's story. From a quiet cafe in New York to a windswept beach in Maine, their journey reminds us that sometimes the smallest acts, a helping hand, a shared silence, a translated sentence, can lead to something much greater than we ever imagined. Because in the end, love doesn't always arrive with grand gestures. Sometimes it walks in quietly, asks if you need help with a French contract, and changes your life forever. If this story touched your heart, made you smile, or reminded you of the quiet power of kindness, hit the hype button to show your love. Subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more heartwarming tales that speak straight to the soul. And don't forget to share this with someone who still believes in love, resilience, and second chances. We'll be here with more stories that heal, inspire, and remind you you're never alone. Until next time.